Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Logan Horn. Today, I'm joined by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matvei, Zator, and Peter Baracchini. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing good. We're getting closer to the draft, and it's not close. Getting closer. We're going to get deep into talking about it, which is awesome. So, doing awesome.
Great. That's awesome. Peter, it's good to see you as well. How are you doing today?
Doing great. A lot of sports going on, playoff football. But then again, we're here talking about prospects when, that's just the main thing of this because we got a lot of prospect talk. And I know something happened on Friday that we really want to dig deep and discuss a lot because we have a lot to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys both alluded to, we're going to be talking about the NHL Central Scouting's mid-season draft rankings. They released a preseason one that we talked about a few months ago where they just give you a list of some players to watch. But now they start to actually rank midpoint in the season, and they'll do another at the end of the season. For those who don't know, they split up their lists between North American players, North American goalies, international players, and international goalies, as if international means anything. They just don't want to say Europe because there might be like 3 players from somewhere outside of Europe. So those are the 4 lists that they release. And so we're going to be talking about those. There are some wild picks in those, at least in our opinions. So we're going to really dig into those here. So we'll actually jump right in. So there are plenty of players here that, we might have ranked a lot higher or a lot lower. So Matt, I'm wondering, who is a player on the North American skaters list that you think is underrated by the NHL Central Scouting?
Well, I've talked about this player before, and he's severely underrated on this list. William Whitelaw. I mean, I had him, I believe the first time I mentioned him, a first-round pick for sure. He's ranked 55th on the North American list, and that would probably put him 5th, 6th round. I mean,
third or fourth at least,
lower, way lower than the first round, that's for sure. And I don't know why. I mean, there could be there's so many skilled players in this draft. So I mean, some guys are going to drop just because of the amount of skill. So I mean, that could be the case, but I think he's just rated way too low from where some of the other guys that are ahead of him. He's just so skilled, he has such a high compete level that maybe I go for those players. So I mean, I'm gonna love him. It doesn't matter where they're ranked, but he's got such a skill set that could potentially be a high-end player in the NHL. And a lot of the players that have that high motor usually succeed at the NHL level because work ethic is massive. And I've said this before, work ethic is a skill in itself. So I mean, add that to his creativity, his offensive toolkit that he's got. He never takes a shift off. You see some of the goals that he's scored this year in USHL. I mean, he's been good. And the thing is, he's playing at a higher level than a lot of the players, playing the USNDP. He's playing at the USHL level with the Youngstown Phantoms, I believe, right? So he's already producing at that level, and he's being rated in 55th, which is way too low in my opinion. So I hope that they look at it in their final rankings and bump him up a bit, because I think he's closer to a first-round pick than like a 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, Whitelaw's a good pick there, Matt. And I think he's a good example of the size bias in the NHL draft. Yeah. He's measured here as 5'9". NHL Central Scouting does their own height and weight measurements for a lot of the top prospects. And yeah, he's measures in at 5'9". And those are the kind of guys that slip on draft day, and it seems like they're accounting for that a little bit. We probably get into it a little bit more about some of the top guys that are also on the little bit of the shorter end. They really really got they got a bad look. They did not it feels like their skill is discounted because they are a little shorter.
Yeah.
Which doesn't always seem fair, but sometimes it does. It is more accurate on draft day, whether or not it's accurate of their skill.
I compare him to a lot like Connor Garland. I mean, he's got that type of skill set that, a lot of teams love to have in their lineup. So, I mean, I think he's going to end up being a pretty good NHLer, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Peter, who's a player on the North American list that you think is underrated?
Quite a few, but I know I could only pick one, and the one that stands out the most. I mean, I could pick Andrew Cristall, but I'm gonna say that for another day. When it's time to talk about Andrew Cristall, but I'm gonna say Riley Heights from the Prince George Cougars. His teammate Cohen Ziemer, obviously both of them are having really strong seasons on the Cougars. The team itself isn't really that strong. They're kind of middle of the pack. May not get as much attention as a result, or maybe team play. I don't know what the issue is there, but Height is 56 points already in 39 games, and Ziemer's 54. So they're already leading the team, but Height himself at 26 just seems a little bit way too low, because I have him as a 10 to 15 kind of prospect. He's got that awareness, the ability to read the lanes. He's a very smart, being able to create space for himself, finding the cross seams and passing lanes. And he's got an underrated shot as well. He's got a wicked release. So he's got like all the tool sets to be an effective centerman. Talked about Whitelaw's height of being 5'9". He's 5'10", but you could get away with it because you got a little bit more height, 5'10", 5'11". But I just don't understand why he's that low, because he was great at the Helenka Gretzky tournament, being one of those key players for Team Canada. He's been a dominant WHL player this time around. He's top 5 in league scoring. I believe it's Bedard and Cristall 1-2 ahead of him, and then Benson. So 3 guys ahead of him that are ahead of him in the rankings. He's still keeping pace with them. So don't understand the whole issue right there, but I'm thinking they're really underrating Riley Height.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that one as well. Ranked 26th just among North American skaters. If you had him 26th overall, I still might think you have him a little too low, because I see him as probably a top 20 pick. If he has a good finish to the season, maybe sneak into the top 16, like a lottery pick deal there. But that was the biggest one that shocked me when I took my first look at these lists, for sure. Okay, so now we're going to flip the coin, the opposite side. Matt, I'll come to you again. Who's a player on the list for North American skaters that you think is ranked too high, that's overrated?
Well, I mean, I don't think he's ranked way too high, but I think this guy is not a fourth. Is Ryan Leonard. He is a very skilled player. I mean, I think will go in the first round, probably mid first round, but he's ranked 4th on the North American list, which probably puts him in the top 10, at the end of it. So, I mean, that's pretty high for me. I mean, yes, he's produced at the, the USNDP level, at the USHL level with USNDP juniors. He's got 2 goals in 6 games there, 23 goals in 30 with the U18 team. So, I mean, he's producing, but I think, rated ahead of guys like Zach Benson, Riley Height, guys like that. I don't think he's at that level to be above these guys. I mean, production levels maybe around the same, but I think he's more of a guy that's going to be, a lot of the scouting reports saying that he's good with playing with skilled players. So, I mean, he can complement these highly skilled guys, and that's needed in the NHL level. So, I mean, he's probably going to be a pretty good NHL at this point, but when he gets there, but I'm not sure being 4th on this list is where he should be. I think, maybe I'd probably put him in the 15 range on this list. I mean, there's so many other guys that I think are just way too, they just have more of a well-rounded game, and more offensively skilled than he is. So, I mean, Leonard's going to be a really good player, but I don't think he's 4th on this list.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. He's a really solid 2-way winger. He's pretty strong for his age. Seems like he's going to be a really good middle 6 forward, probably in the NHL. There's a chance he's top 6, no doubt, but I don't know. You want a little more excitement out of a prospect that you would probably be taking in the top 10. And it just doesn't feel like, I don't know, the ceiling isn't quite as high as some of these other guys you could probably be taking in that same range. So that's a good call there, Matt. Peter, who's a player on the North American list for the NHL Central Scouting mid-season rankings that you think is ranked too high?
As much as I like him, and he, again, going back to the WHL, he's turning it up as a defenseman, is Lukas Dragicevic. Being ranked 12th overall, obviously it's impressive because he has 46 points in 36 games. Absolutely fantastic with his, puck moving, playmaking abilities as an offensive defenseman, but he still has his defensive deficiencies away from the puck. Tends to be a little bit over aggressive and gets caught out of position at times. Obviously, if you have that defenseman with that kind of dynamic skill set, you'd want to take him early on because you can develop him as a defenseman and get those bad habits out and work it into his game, which is a good thing. But, there are times where, it's just all offense and it doesn't quite work out. So maybe him being in that 15 to 20 range where he could be a late first, early second, I think that might be more of a safe bet, but that just seems a little bit too high for me.
Yeah, that is pretty high. He's the top ranked defenseman out of all North American skaters, which isn't necessarily wrong. There's not a ton of North American defensemen that are really pushing on him, but he's ahead of all of them by quite a wide margin, which is I don't know. It feels like they're valuing his offense there a lot, which is fair because he's quite dynamic, but I don't know, hasn't shown a whole lot else, even just in junior so far. So yeah, that's a good point there. Now we'll talk about a possible late round steal, something like that. So Peter, is there a player that you think might be available in, say, the 3rd round or later that you think is like a home run swing, one where either you strike out or you hit a grand slam out of the park, whatever, someone that you're really betting on the upside there, but could be a real good value pick?
Yeah, his brother felt at a 2nd round, and I'm going with his younger brother, Luca Pinelli, who's ranked 49th, just inside the top 50. And watching him play at the OHL level right now, he's just absolutely dynamic. With his situational awareness, he's always involved with the play, creating space for himself and his teammates as well. Really dynamic skill set where he's always aggressive. He doesn't let his size get the best of him. Always involved. And again, I think the knock on him is going to be he's 5'8", 165 pounds. But there are times where he doesn't let his size or his weight get the best of him, where he does show good strength and, controlling the play, controlling the pace and shielding the puck very well. I think he's got that low center of gravity that allows him to, maintain that position and just fend players off, even though he's a little bit shorter than them. I think it's the way that he's at right now is like late 2nd, early 3rd, or even going down to the 4th round, possibly. I don't see that quite much with Pinelli because his brother should have been a 1st rounder. He's looking like a 1st rounder right now, but don't sleep on him because I think he's going to probably have a strong second half and maybe move his way up just a bit.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Pinelli has been producing like crazy this year. And yeah, he's ranked, what was he ranked? He's ranked in the 40s, 49. Yeah. Yeah, he's been creeping closer and closer to the 1st round for a lot of people. So I understand the size, and that's probably a big inhibitor for him here, but that seems pretty wild. Matt, who's a player that you think could probably go in the 3rd round or later that you think is a real home run swing type draft pick?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a home run if he's going to become a ridiculously good defenseman, but I think has potential to be a great top 4 guy. And this is a Mazden Leslie. He's Vancouver Giants. We're close to home here. And again, and this is a right-handed shot defenseman too, which not many of them are around that have the skill set he has. And he's improved over the time. And biggest thing for me is he's unranked by anyone right now. That's the main levels. And the only one he's ranked is obviously Central Scouting. And he's 80th on their list, which is probably a 4th, 5th round pick, probably, maybe even later. So, I mean, and he's got 30 points in 40 games. He's got 7 goals. And last season, he had a pretty good, not high production, 19 points in 64 games, but He's on pace. He's already past that and on pace for 51 points, which is a pretty solid season in the WHL, I would say. And he's developed his playmaking ability. He's scoring more goals. I think he's more that modern day type offensive defenseman. Probably, his two-way game. Obviously, defensively, he's going to have to get better as time goes on. He's not a small defenseman either. 6'1", 181. So, I mean, he doesn't have that against him. And that biggest thing for me is that right-hand shot. I mean, you get right-hand shot defensemen that have that type of modern-day defenseman skill set, you get them in your system. And because those things I don't think you can teach, because if you have that as instincts, that you're already a step ahead. So I think keep an eye on Leslie, because I think he will get drafted. It's just, I think he's going to get drafted a lot lower than he should be. I think he should be probably a 3rd round pick-ish. And especially in a draft that doesn't have a lot of high-end defensemen, it's very forward heavy. So keep an eye on Leslie, because I think he's going to be a really good guy in the future.
Nice. That's a great call too. I'm actually going to answer this one as well, because there's someone I'm very passionate about. I've mentioned him before on this show, but a prospect that I think could be a bit of a steal, probably not going at least until the 4th or 5th round based on Central Scouting's rankings, is Aiden Fink of the Brooks Bandits in the AJHL, Junior A in Canada. He is leading the entire league in scoring, 76 points in 39 games. He's a 5'9" winger. That's a big reason why he's ranked lower. Also, he's in a league that people don't typically trust a lot unless your name's Cale Makar. He's got a ton of offensive skill, and he's going to be available late. He's ranked 66th among all North American skaters, which I think they're sleeping on him a little bit. I've seen him out in Alberta here a little bit, and I think he would be talked about at least as a 2nd rounder if he played in the WHL. I genuinely believe that. Not saying he's going to be amazing, but I think that could be a real good, valuable pick for someone with a 4th or 5th rounder this year. Could be fun. Okay, so the list for goaltenders, there's the international one and the North American one. Those are also split up. However, the vast majority of the best goaltenders in this draft are playing in North America right now. So I'm really just going to ask this on this side. So the NHL Central Scouting has actually switched up their top goalie. The top goalie for a long time was Michael Hrabal for a lot of people playing in the USHL. But now they have Carson Bjarnasson as a top-ranked goalie in the draft. So, Peter, do you agree with that? Do you think Carson Bjarnasson is the best goalie in the draft? If not, who's the top goalie for you at this point?
Yeah, I tend to disagree there. I think Trey Agassi may have jumped over both him and Hrabal as the top goaltender. And we don't want to hype up goaltenders too much, because we saw what happened with the 17-year-old Yaroslav Askarov, had his play at the tournament. But the way that he came in as a starter, as a 17-year-old, and just took control for Team USA behind a very shaky defensive team, he gave him a chance to win every single time. And that's why they won bronze ultimately, even in that Canada game. A lot of defensive lapses that necessarily wasn't his fault, but when he was on his game, he was on it. And, he's got great vision to track the puck. He's got great positioning. He's got strong lateral movements. He's got everything that you want. Obviously, maybe just a little bit shorter compared to Bjarnasson. He's 6'3", he's 6'1", but he still takes up a good chunk of the net with his size. So I think with his play at the tournament alone, and even the way that he's just dominating the USA with the U18 program this season, I would have him as my top goaltender.
That's definitely a fair pick. It's kind of nice. There's a few guys that are at the top. Like last year, there's no real guaranteed top guy. There's no doubter. Sebastian Kosa, Jesper Wallstedt. There's nobody like that. But it's kind of nice to have some competition. Matt, what's your thought? Do you think Carson Bjarnasson is the top goalie in the draft, or do you have someone else in that spot?
You know what? I'm going to throw out a guy that we talked about in the World Juniors recap, and I'm Adam Guyan. He's 4th. I mean, he's 4th on this list. It's not on the North American list. It's not like he's way down at the bottom, but I think he has the potential of being the first guy off the board. I mean, Trey Augustine, I definitely agree, Peter. I think he definitely pushed himself up there, minus that crazy game that he allowed a bunch of goals in because both goalies did. But he still has a lot of skill and kind of jumped his way into that conversation because of the World Juniors, I think. And of course, Rabel, and we've talked about him before. Bjarnasson definitely has potential to be in there too. But I think Guyan's a really underrated guy that kind of put himself on the map. I think he could potentially be taken, I don't know about first, but could be like the second guy off the board. I mean, I actually wouldn't be surprised if he's first, because he was named the top goaltender for the World Juniors for a reason. Definitely got on the radar of a lot of scouts, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure that 53 save game against Canada in the quarterfinals, I'm sure that put him on some scouts' radars for sure.
Got the size too,
watching him closely in that last half of the year. I think I would agree with Peter, actually. Trey Augustine, I kind of discounted his play for the first half of the year because he's on the US NTDP and they're stacked, and so they always win. So it's easy to have wins and decent save percentages as a goalie there. But seeing what he did as a 17-year-old in a tournament where the vast majority of goalies are 19 years old, was really impressive. USA had a rough defense. They looked at having a bunch of offensive defensemen, and that did not work for them defensively. So I was really impressed with him, and I think he would be my top one as well. I think the reason he's not there is the lack of the NHL size, because goalies nowadays are 6'2" and up, 6'3" and up. And Hrabal is 6'6", Bjarnasson is 6'3", and Augustine is 6'1". There's not a ton of starting caliber goalies or even tandem goalies that are that size. But I was really impressed with him. I think he could be a late second, third round pick maybe. He'd be my pick as well. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you guys a couple quick fire questions. So you guys don't know these. I want your honest thoughts in the moment. Short, simple answer, not like one word or anything, but keep it simple. Do your best. And those out there watching or listening at home, leave your answers in the comments below. I want to see what you guys think about these. So because we've already talked about them a little bit, I'm going to come to you first, Peter. Andrew Cristall has scored an absurd 62 points in 36 WHL games this year, behind only Connor Bedard in total points. What will it take for him to be considered as one of the top prospects and to be selected in the top 16 of the draft?
Well, I would say be taller than 5'9", 5'10", because, but then again, Connor Bedard's 5'10", but then again, he's the number one pick. But I would just say keep doing what he's doing, because at some point it's just going to keep on resonating with scouts that the size is going to be a non-factor and he should be rising up. Yep.
That's a fair point. My answer is grow 3 inches. Matt, what are your thoughts? Andrew Cristall has been incredible in the WHL this year, just one of the most impressive offensive players in the league. What will it take for him to be considered a top prospect and go in the top 16 this year?
Hell, keep producing, keep showing why. I mean, the thing is, he'll keep scoring, keep putting up the points, because I mean, scouts, they watch, and eventually someone's going to take him. And the thing is that there are teams that will, like look at Tyler Boucher, where he went in the draft. I mean, yeah, he wasn't crazy producing, but a team saw something, and you never know. I think Cristall will turn the heads of some scout that will tell their GM, draft him here, because I think wherever he's drafted, I think he's going to be drafted lower than when he should. And whoever gets him is going to be, raking in the the accolades when he does become such a top line player, which I think he will.
Yeah, it feels like he's got Dallas Stars written all over him.
Yeah,
like a late first, early second, something.
One team is going to make everyone else regret.
Yes,
letting him fall.
Yeah, there's a good chance. One thing actually that you said, Peter, there, Connor Bedard and Cristall are very similar height-wise and pretty similar production-wise in the WHL. Yet there's this huge gap in rankings where people put them. And so I think if you're looking at a tangible thing, he can't grow 3 inches on purpose. But a tangible thing, if he wants to make a change in his game that will kind of put him on that higher level, I think it's his skating. We've seen his hands and we've seen his playmaking, and he's just steps ahead of most other players. I think his skating could use some work. He's got a little bit of an awkward stride to my eye. And I think that's probably the biggest thing holding him back. aside from his height.
Yeah.
But as we see, Bedard, the height isn't really, nobody's talking about that unless
No.
you're Grant McCagg. But we won't talk about him today. Anyway, I've got another quick fire question here. So we mentioned briefly the US NTDP players that are ranked pretty highly. Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault all play on the same top line, and Oliver Moore is the second line center for the US national team there. And they're all ranked in the top 15 for North American skaters, with Smith is third, Leonard is fourth, Moore is sixth, and Perreault is 15th. So even though they're next to each other, it seems pretty clear that Will Smith is close to the kind of top tier in this draft. Who do you guys think, I'll come to you first, Matt, which of the rest of them, Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault, or Oliver Moore, is going to be drafted next? Which of those US NTDP guys is going next?
Well, as much as I said Ryan Leonard's too high, I think he's going to, because of the fact that he's that 200-foot guy. And, he's closer to NHL ready because of that. So I'm going to say Leonard's going to be the next one.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Peter, so it seems like Will Smith is going to be the first US NTDP player drafted this year. Who do you think is going next?
Yeah, Leonard, definitely. And it's all because of his work ethic and his hard-nosed drive ability to play that power forward-like game, but still be very skilled and very smart in all three zones.
Nice. I'm going to go off the board, but not really, because they have him ranked sixth. I think Oliver Moore is next up because he's a center. He's an incredible skater. In my opinion, one of the best skaters in the draft. And he's got a pretty solid release and he works hard. I think he could be a good two-way center, middle six guy, probably, but I like him. So I think he might be there. All right. We're going to take a quick break at this point. So I could tell all of you at home that this show is brought to you by Sports Fan Side Hustle, a new digital course that teaches passionate sports fans how to make a lucrative side income off their love of the game. Get off the sidelines and into the game with a course that will teach you more than 14 different and easy to start methods that any sports fan can use to make a steady part-time or full-time income. All you need is the internet, a computer, passion for sports, and a few hours a week. Go to sportssidehustle.com to get the absolutely free startup guide that will explain 4 keys to unlocking this income opportunity. Again, that's sportssidehustle.com. Get started today. All right, so we went over the North American list and our thoughts there. So we're going to cut to the international skaters side here. So Peter, who's a player on the international skaters list that you think is underrated?
I'm not basing this because of where he's ranked, because he is technically ranked really high, but I don't think he gets talked about enough considering who's in ahead of him, and that's Otto Stenberg. I really, again, not ranking based, but I just feel like, there should be some more attention on him because of the fact that he could play a very smart and well-rounded game, but also have that flash and creativity that makes, what teams want to see in the potential centerman. Obviously a little bit smaller, 5'11", but also he played in the World Junior A Challenge, and that's a tournament that doesn't get enough attention compared to the World Juniors because it just happened right before then. But at the same time, he looked fantastic, and he helped Sweden win a bronze medal. I believe Sweden outdueled Canada in the shootout. So he was very essential to that team, and the way that he's able to still play that very creative and highly skilled game, but still being a smart, calculated two-way centerman, I think that should be a reason why he may be flying under the radar, not in terms of his rank, but just an overall play.
Yeah, that's a good pick. He coming into the year after his play at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, Stenberg was thought very highly of. Some people thought he was a little better than Leo Carlsson, maybe he'd be the top Swede off the board. That has changed a lot this year. Not to discount what Stenberg has done or anything, I do want to point out that at the World Junior A Challenge, the player that led the tournament by far in scoring was Aiden Fink of the Brooks Bandits in the AJHL. Just saying. But Stenberg's a great one. I think he's ranked, it's pretty respectful here, 6th overall, just after the guys like Dvorsky and Edward Shala. But I think that's a nice spot for him. I think he's dropped a little too far in a lot of people's minds, but just because the production isn't where people expect it. But I like that one a lot, Peter. That's a good call. Matt, who's a player on the international skaters list that you think is underrated?
Well, I'm going to go with the guy who played the World Juniors, and Alex Charnik or Chirnik. I always have problems pronouncing these guys' names, but he had a pretty good tournament, had a couple goals. One word I really describe him as speed. I mean, he's so fast. And one thing though, like with Stenberg, he's smaller. He's 5'10". I mean, he's on that smaller side. He can, get stronger. I mean, obviously this is something that most players need to do at this level. They need to get bigger and stronger. But he probably won't grow any, but he could get stronger. And he's also that type of playmaking guy that could be like a complement, more of a scorer on his line, because I think there's not a lot of these guys, wingers that can set up these goal scorers, because you have all these centermen that are great playmakers, but you need wingers that can do it too, because there are some centermen that do not, that need a guy to set them up, because sometimes they can't do it themselves. I think Chernik has a real good chance of being an NHL player because of his speed. I mean, the NHL's turned to that type of speed game. Look at what Connor McDavid can do with that speed. And I'm not saying he's that fast, but he does have that speed. I think that could be a game-breaking skill that he has in the NHL at some point. And I think he's a little bit lower. He's 21st. Which is not really low, but I think he could be a little bit higher. And just watching him at the World Juniors, he really was impressive. So, Slovakia again has a few guys that you can look to. They're an emerging country. I think Chernik is just another guy in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Those are some good picks. I think if I had to pick an underrated player here, he's not that underrated, but because he's only ranked 10th, is David Reinbacher, Austrian defenseman. I think he really put himself on a lot of people's radars, just like fans of hockey at the World Juniors. But I think he didn't get as much respect as I think he deserves, because he was on an Austrian team that was really poor overall, that struggled and was ultimately relegated. But as we've heard since the tournament, he was playing very sick the entire tournament, and he was still probably their best player, at very least by far their best defenseman. Big right-hand shot defenseman, playing well in the top Swiss Pro League at 18. He's really good in a professional league. I like him a lot. His ranking at 10th tells me that they think he's probably a late first round pick, but I think he's closer to the middle of it personally. But that's just because he's one of my favorite guys in the draft. So who knows? Maybe I'm thinking too highly, but I think he deserves a little more respect than that, but who knows? Okay. So Peter, I'll come to you on the other side now. Who's a player on the international list that you think is overrated, ranked a little too high?
So if, where Stenberg was because it wasn't because of his ranking, this one is because of his ranking. That's Daniil Boot. I honestly think he's ranked really high, and rightfully so, because he does have, a pretty decent amount of production this season with his goal scoring abilities. But I think he's just known for that. He doesn't seem to get involved in the play as much. He tends to float around on the ice, and his situational awareness and on ice IQ just really isn't quite there compared to some other players. So to see him just outside that top 10 and considering being a first, think is a little bit too high, because he needs to try and improve his all-around game and get a little bit more smart in all three zones, because I don't think that's the right spot for him, considering that. I understand the international side outside the top 10 maybe isn't as strong, but I do think that it isn't quite where I would have him. I think I would probably have him closer later to the end of the second, beginning of the third, but he could still, again, development is key. If he's able to put in the work and make things right, then this is going to be a great pick, but I just think it's a little bit too high for this moment.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree there. He's Boot has a great shot. He's a big winger, but that skating and the IQ, the hockey IQ, those could use some work, I think. And I'd be a little little nervous to take him in the first for sure. Matt, who's a player on the international side you think is a little overrated?
Well, I mean, I think again, this is ranking, not fact that he won't ever be something in the NHL at some point. But Lenny Hamanaho, I mean, he's got all the aspects of a Finnish player. Great work ethic. Battles hard in the corners, does all that stuff that he's probably going to be a great middle six guy. Maybe bottom six guy, one guy in that middle range there. But to be ranked 7th on this list, I think you should be more of a dynamic offensive player than a guy that you're going to be, okay, you can be a complimentary guy on a middle six. I don't see that being in the top 10 on a list as being, he should be more of a high-end player, in my opinion. But, like I said, it's not like he's not going to do anything and be a great player at the higher level, but I think he's just way too high at 7th. Like I said, complimentary winger, and I would say he should be a bit more exciting to be in the top 10.
Sure, that's a fair one. He's been rising a lot lately for a lot of people, but it feels pretty sudden. We'll see how that goes. So as the second half of the year begins here. Matt, I'm going to come back to you again. Who's your home run swing pick? Who's your steal on the international side? Somebody you think is going to go a little later in the draft that could be a real steal.
Well, Blaine mentioned him on the last episode in the World Juniors recap, and he's gotten on my radar because of it. Ian Scherzer, and 111th on this list. They're probably anticipating him being in the 6th or 7th round. I mean, he could go down that low. If at all. I mean, I don't think he's ranked on anyone's lists right now, on any bigger ones. So, but showing what he did at the World Juniors, I think he is a really hard worker. He's one of those guys that could potentially be, solid bottom 6 player. But we said home run, but I'd say home run being drafted low and making the NHL being a solid,
for sure.
That's a home run to me.
A real contributor. Yeah.
7th round picks don't usually make it to the NHL and be a solid player. I think Scherzer has that potential to be a solid player at the NHL level at some point. So I'm going with Scherzer. Hats off to Blaine for putting it out there, because he was right there with them. So I like him a lot. So I think keep an eye on him, because I think he will get drafted. It's just where.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good one. He got a lot of attention at the World Juniors. Well, as much as you could get on that Austrian team, really. tons of energy, scored a couple goals, which, like almost 50% of the team's goals, I think. That's a fun one. I hope he gets drafted. We need more Austrian players in the league. And I think I agree. I think he's got a shot there. Peter, who's someone that you think could be a bit of a steal on this international list?
Yeah, I'm still sticking with Sweden, and I'm going with Kalle Carlsson. Obviously, again, he played with Stenberg at the World Junior A Championship. Obviously, he may not get a lot of attention, but I really like the way that he's produced at the J20 level, 24 points in 30 games. Kind of has that two-way mentality, is able to, attack with great aggression and great speed. I think that obviously he's ranked 49th as well. I think he's probably going to go later on in the draft, but I still see a lot of potential in him where he can develop into like a very steady middle 6 kind of player, where he has that energy, has the ability to chip in offensively, but also has the smarts to be a very effective two-way player in within his own zone. So the fact that he has that all-around game, I think, is why I think he may be a great prospect that some team can look at and be like, hey, this is probably a player that could be a difference maker and fly under the radar for us. We're going to take him later on, or if he's available in that 4th, 5th, or 6th round, maybe a little bit too low for 6, but 4th for sure, they're definitely going to take him, because I think he's got a lot of upside.
That's a good one too. I like Kalle Carlsson. One I'm just going to throw out there, he's ranked 75th among international skaters, probably a late round pick if he goes at all, is Isaac Born, the Swedish player. He's playing for Frölunda, about a point per game in the top Swedish junior league, playing with Noah Dauer Nielsen. And he has a couple points in like a dozen or more SHL games, which is pretty impressive. He was eligible for the draft last year, just barely, and missed out as one of the younger guys. But he's a wicked skater, has crazy top speed. I think he's got a real shot, especially if he sticks in the SHL this year. Okay, so we are going to move on from the NHL Central Scouting's draft rankings, and we're actually going to move on to our very own Peter Baracchini's draft rankings. You recently released his January edition, top 64 prospects. Check it out at thehockeywriters.com. Peter, would you be so kind as to walk us through your top 5 players in the draft? Because I know there's been a little movement, not a ton, but a little. I hear you have Bedard at 5.
Yeah, you're right. If you were expecting a shock at number 1, yeah, that ain't happening.
No.
If I could have Bedard higher than 1, I probably would, but he's still number 1 for me. I probably should have just jumped over 1 because you all know who's going first overall. But yeah, second is Adam Fantilli from the University of Michigan. Third, Leo Carlsson from Örebro from the SHL. Matvei Michkov of HK Sochi right now because he is on loan. And rounding up my top 5 is Will Smith from the U18 program.
Nice. So I don't remember what you had in your first one there, Peter. Did you end up swapping Michkov and Carlsson on there, or did you have them in that order in your first draft rankings?
In my first set, I believe I had Michkov 2, Fantilli 3, and then Carlsson 4. Obviously, with the way still a lot of uncertainty with Michkov's contract, but the way that Leo Carlsson has played, the way Adam Fantilli has dominated the NCAA as a freshman, it's hard not to try and pinpoint or have them higher because, you know, teams value NHL centermen. They do. And that's not to discredit Michkov because he is a fantastic goal scorer. But at the same time, if you're looking for centermen that you want to build a franchise around, you're going to do so with, well, aside from Bedard, you're going to do that with Fantilli. You're going to do that with Carlsson, who both have the size, the skill, the smarts, and everything to be an impactful top-line center at the NHL.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think it's been harder and harder to keep Michkov really high, partly because it's hard to follow his games a little bit, but also the uncertainty around if he's going to come to the NHL anytime soon. Definitely not super soon. But there's a little bit of worries around that if he's going to sign another deal in Russia or something like that.
Small correction.
Yeah,
I did have Carlsson at 5th, not 4th. So he did rise a little bit more.
He's risen even more than that. No, totally fair. Michkov has started to play, as you mentioned. He got loaned to another team that had like a, I think 18 or 19 game losing streak when he got loaned there, and it went up to 22, 23 game losing streak before he was a huge part of snapping that. He's been playing pretty well there. They put him on a real bottom feeder, but he's been doing pretty well. Okay, Matt, do you have any reactions to the top 5 Peter gave us? Anyone that you're happy to see move around, or someone you're surprised is still first overall? Or
you can say Connor Bedard, that's fine.
Oh, why is Connor Bedard first overall? Will Smith,
he's short.
Come on. No, this top 5 is really good. I think personally, I would actually put Carlsson at 2. I mean, Fantilli's he's great talent, but I think Carlsson really pushed himself ahead a little bit of Fantilli in my mind at the World Juniors, but because Carlsson, I think, could play in the NHL next year because of just he seems to be such a well-rounded player now. And so that's not a huge change. I mean, you're flipping Fantilli and Carlsson, but it's the only thing that I would say. It's not much difference.
Sure. Yeah. It feels like at the World Juniors, the gap between Connor Bedard and everyone else definitely was expanded, but the gap between second and third, between Fantilli and Carlsson, who are kind of becoming the consensus 2 and 3 guys for a lot of people, it feels like that gap has shortened. It's shrunk quite a bit. It's not quite as pronounced as it was when we saw Fantilli start the year with 2 points per game in the NCAA. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Could be some drama on draft day, which would be fun. Peter, can you walk us through the rest of your top 10, 6 through 10?
Yeah. 6, I have Zach Benson from the Winnipeg Ice. 7, Edward Shala from Cometa Brno. 8, Andrew Cristall from the Kelowna Rockets, 9, Braden Yeager from the Moose Jaw Warriors, and Dalibor Dvorsky at 10 with AIK from the Hockey Allsvenskan.
Nice. I'm curious, what would it take for you to put a defenseman in your top 10? Because I know we've talked a long time about this being a forward-heavy draft, but it's been 20 years since we've had a top 5 of a draft without a defenseman. So odds are one defenseman could sneak into the top 5, but even the top 10 feels like a bit of an ask right now. So what would it take for you to do that?
That's a really good question. It really is. I mean, just given how deep the talent is at the forward level, where you have a lot of top line players, I think the closest one that displayed that at the World Juniors was Axel Sandin-Pellikka, who could possibly move into a top 10 spot. He's just outside of mine right now, where he's, at 13 in that midway point. But given how he was relied on heavily with those ice time minutes, the way that he was able to play both offensively and even, display some great defensive qualities within his own zone, needs to get a little bit stronger. I think that strength is going to be a little bit of a key factor. Like you said before, a lot of these players need to add that strength. But given his overall skill set and the smarts and his ability to move the puck extremely well, he could very well move into my top 10, not necessarily the top 5 because of how great, how many elite level talent that you can have there. But top 10 is definitely not out of the question.
Yeah, for sure. Matt, do you have any thoughts on this top 10? Anyone you're a little surprised to see up that high?
No, I think Cristall was the biggest one that I thought, but knowing Peter, I knew he was going to be in the top 10, and I would put him in the top 10. I really have no arguments with anyone here. I mean, I'd say the only guy that I could potentially just talked about is Sandin-Pellikka. I think could potentially maybe be a 10 above Dalibor Dvorsky there, but I just being 13th, it's not that far out of the top 10. I think he definitely could push his way in there. That's the only guy that I would think could get in there at some point. Riley Heidt could be in the top 10. He's just outside at 11. But there's just so much talent in this draft.
For sure.
You can throw guys all over the place that, and say, oh yeah, they could be there. Another guy that I'm just going down a little further, Matthew Wood. I would actually push him closer to the top 10, but I just because I like him so much. But I really have no big beefs with the top 10. So
yeah, I think that's a good call there, Matt, with Matt Wood. Maybe not quite top 10 in my eyes either, but feels like he's kind of just been playing in Adam Fantilli's shadow as a big guy with a lot of skill. He's got a really underrated shot in my eyes. People aren't really talking about that. I think he could be one of the better goal scorers, at least purely when it comes to the shot from this draft. And he's big and he's got great hands for his size. So I like him a lot as well. I wouldn't say I'm surprised to see Andrew Cristall that high because, as you mentioned, Matt, we know Peter. And he's been raving about him for months. But I do appreciate that you have Benson above him, despite the scoring gap in actual numbers, just because it feels like Benson has that skating, has that dynamic skating, and it doesn't hurt that he's on a better team, Benson. But I like that. I like your top 10. It's not too far off mine. When I have another one coming out, I guess. Who knows when that is? Okay.
So let's see. Surprise.
Yeah, it's a surprise for myself at this point. All right, Peter, can you point out a couple players on your rankings here that you want to highlight? Maybe someone who's risen or fallen a lot in your mind lately, maybe from the World Juniors, or someone that you think you like a lot more, dislike a lot more than just kind of the public consensus, someone that stands out.
Yeah, one of them is definitely Jaden Perron. I mean, we've talked about him on the show previously before, how he's just absolutely, showing, or just not necessarily dominating because he has kind of cooled down, but he's still maintaining his presence in the USHL. Dynamic playmaker, great skater with great edges. The ability to, change his speed, maintain that control and gap between defenders, fending them off, and try to use that skating to his advantage. It's always huge. So to have him at 17, when I didn't even have him ranked in my preseason one, is a big one, is a big step within my top 32, jumping up to 17. he was a big riser for me, a big faller, obviously. I'm gonna say Callum Ritchie. I mean, he's picked up his play as of late because I thought Ritchie would be a top 10 kind of player, trying to build off that success. But then again, the Oshawa Generals themselves, they just haven't been that great of a team this season. He's still, among the team leaders, but with that production, we expected him to take a little bit step, but he still has that skill set to drive hard to the net, be a great playmaker, play a strong 200-foot game, excelling in all situations. He's got that presence. Obviously, you would like to see the production a little bit more, but for him to still be on my list, he's still a first-round talent, no doubt about that.
Nice. Okay, Matt, when you're looking at this list, who's someone that you're a little surprised by, someone that's a little higher than you'd expect, maybe someone a little lower, one of each if you've got them?
Well, I already mentioned Matthew Wood. I think he's a little bit low for me. I mean, I'd probably put him in, maybe not top 10, but I would say probably in the 10 to 15 range. On my rankings, he'd be there. And Pellikka, I would actually put into the top 10. Like I said, I think he just showed so much of the World Juniors that, his coach just gave him all the minutes because he knew he could be relied upon to do what he could. So, I mean, I think at that age level, and just like what Connor Bedard did, I think at that age, obviously not as crazy, but, to be that poised on the back end, I think is huge for me. I think he pushes himself into that conversation. So those are the only two guys I really could see as a big part for me. Your top 32 is pretty good to me. And, you go into the second round, you can throw guys all over the place, but I'd say those two guys. And I love Whitelaw in the first round. So
I knew you would. Yep.
Classic. I mentioned it before, but Andrew Cristall, I'm not quite as high on as you. Probably have him in the around 15, maybe. Although I think there's a very, very it's very unlikely that he'll even be a top 20 pick come draft day. Just the size and the skating, I think, scares people off more than maybe it should, but I don't see him ending up quite there. Mine just stopped loading, but Colby Barlow you had pretty high. I like that ranking a lot. You have him at 12. It came back. Just a strong two-way winger. He's draft eligible for the first time, and he's already the captain of the Owen Sound Attack in the OHL, which is awesome. Great goal scorer. I think that's a great call up at 12 there. I think he's if you have maybe the top tier of the draft is top tier is just Bedard, but if you say the top tier is like the top 5, and then the next one has the Dvorskys, the Shalas, maybe Sandin-Pellikka. I think either at the end of that second tier or the start of the next one, Barlow's right there, and I like him a lot. That's a good call there. Someone that I think you're a little lower on than me, which is a surprise because usually these are the guys that I wouldn't put up either, is Charlie Stramel. You have him at 41.
Yeah. Which
is, that could be where he goes. He hasn't shown a ton of offense in the NCAA this year, which you would really like to see from him. But I liked what I saw at the World Juniors when he was just let loose and just told to just go be a wrecking ball and do whatever he can. I liked that. I thought he looked pretty solid there. I liked him. I like him as a big power forward prospect. His friends call him Big Rig, even though he's 18. So you can take from that what you will. But overall, really like a lot of these picks. You have Trey Augustine in the first round as well. That's kind of fun. I like it. I wouldn't be shocked.
Went a little bit crazy with that
real
one.
Well for himself. He showed really well for himself though at the World Juniors, and everyone needs goalies. You can never have too much goalie depth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that, Peter. I'm actually going to give you guys a couple more quick fire questions here that I've got ready. We kind of went over this, but I just want to hear your thoughts again. NHL Central Scouting has Leo Carlsson as the top European prospect at this point, above Matvei Michkov, even though he's really started to heat up in the KHL now that he's actually getting regular minutes. Do you agree with that decision? Do you think Carlsson is the best European prospect? Yes. Sorry. Do you agree with that? Do you think he's the best, or do you think it's a little bit, if Michkov's situation in Russia and his contract is holding him back a little bit in the eyes of NHL Central Scouting? So Do you think Carlsson is the best European prospect, best international prospect? Or do you think Michkov is is the best prospect, but is being held down by external situation stuff? Matt, I'll come to you first here.
Yeah, I think so. I think, for Michkov, if all the circumstances were different, the World Juniors, Russia was in it. He was producing at the level that Bedard was. I mean, he could have potentially been the top goal scorer at the World Juniors. I mean, he's got that talent. So I think yes, at some point, but Carlsson's just shown so well as that 200-foot big centerman that everyone loves. Michkov's a winger too. I think centerman, like Peter said, is huge. You need these top guys because to win cups, you need at least two of them. So, I mean, maybe even three. So, yeah, I'd say yes and no. I think even if Michkov was here, I think Carlsson would still be in that conversation. But I think he is being held back because of all the things around it that just out of his control.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. Peter, what do you think? Do you think NHL Central Scouting got it right that Carlsson is the best prospect, or do you think best European prospect, or do you think Michkov is the best and is just being held down a little bit?
No, I agree with Matt. I think his answer was spot on. Obviously, Leo Carlsson has shown that he's able to play well with men in the SHL. He's got excellent poise to his game. He isn't thrown off very easily, and he's very smart in all situations. With Michkov, yeah, I think that, the contract is a big issue. I mean, like Matt said, a lot of other factors, considering the fact that Russia has been suspended from play internationally in all competition because of the ongoing war in Russia. I mean, Ukraine, sorry. I think that, there's, and again, the Russian factor too, considering his contract, it is huge. Is someone really, really going to take that contract on, wait 3 years when, you could get him right away? That's going to be huge. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, a lot of factors holding Michkov back, but Leo Carlsson has definitely shown that he's definitely worthy of being the top prospect. No doubt about that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I've been one of the most stout defenders of Michkov as the years gone on here. Because I do still believe that contract situation isn't so bad, because he's going to develop at home. He's going to get big ice time because he's already getting that. And he's going to show up NHL ready, probably ready to pop into your top six.
Yeah.
If he adjusts well to North America, maybe middle six to start. But it's been harder and harder with all that situation. Even without that, if you don't consider it, it's been harder and harder to keep him above Carlsson. Partly, like you guys mentioned, the value of a center versus a winger is huge. And I do believe Michkov has a higher ceiling, higher goal scoring ability, no doubt. And he's a brilliant player, maybe the smartest in the draft. But Carlsson as a center, he's got everything you could dream of in a center, top six guy, maybe top line guy. It's tough to put Michkov at maybe fourth overall, because he's probably going to be one of the greatest, most skilled players to ever go fourth overall. Yeah. But that might be the right call. And if you're an NHL GM and you want to take Michkov in the top five, either make sure your owner signs off on it, or make sure that your contract goes until he's going to be in the NHL. Yeah. That's my advice, because that's going to be huge. Okay, my next question here. It seems like the NHL Central Scouting Bureau was really impressed by the performance of Axel Sandin-Pellikka at the World Juniors, because they have him ranked as the third best international skater and by far the top ranked defenseman on either side. Do you believe he's the best defenseman in the draft at this point? Or do you think someone like Mikhail Gulyayev, David Reinbacher, or Lukas Dragicevic is the top guy? Who do you have as your top defenseman? Matt, I'll come to you first.
Well, I already said Axel Sandin-Pellikka has been my top 10, so I'm going to say he is the top guy. Like I said, I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but he just showed so much at the World Juniors to me, to being that solid offensive deep, and he's good two-way guy. I think he's going to be a really good NHL defenseman. I think he is ahead of those two guys you mentioned. Reinbacher, I think, could potentially get closer to him. Dragicevic is the same thing, but I think he just, like I said, pulled ahead for me at the World Juniors. He was already pretty high on my list already, but I think he even pushed himself even higher.
Yeah, for sure. That's a fair one. I mean, he was very impressive, even though he didn't have crazy point totals. He played really well for himself there, helped his draft stock, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Peter, what are your thoughts? Do you think Axel Sandin-Pellikka is, I mean, we could see on your rankings, but what makes him for you, I guess, the top defenseman in this draft, and how close is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even close. He is the top defender for me at this point. It was Cam Allen, but then again, the season that he's having, it just kind of downward spiral for him in the Guelph Storm, but hopefully he's able to try and turn things around. But yeah, the big thing for me for Sandin-Pellikka was seeing how well he does defensively at, the tournament where he is a little bit younger, competition is a little bit strong, or his opponents are going to be a little bit stronger. Mm-hmm. And he did fairly well. I mean, I used the tweet from Leslie Allen and where they tracked a lot of his, underlying numbers, and his entry prevention and defensive play or defense against the rush was really, really strong. And that's what you want to see too from a defender with that kind of smart. So the fact that he was able to work well against the rush, again, maybe he needs to work on his positioning a little bit more when, engaging on the cycle or within his own zone in front of his own net. But the promise is there. And if he's able to continue to do that, that's going to be great for him, great for his draft stock, and definitely possibly the chance to move up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at him and you think just pure offensive defenseman, but as you mentioned, some of the guys that I think elite prospects did a lot of manual tracking of some advanced stats, and Sandin-Pellikka did really well for himself defensively as well, which is impressive for such a young 17-year-old at that tournament. Personally, it's really close for me. It's a bit of a toss-up between Sandin-Pellikka and David Reinbacher in my mind, just because the size and skating combo for Reinbacher is just something special. We've seen in the last few years, last 4 or 5 drafts, guys like Keandre Miller and Moritz Seider, I guess, being kind of, in my eyes, a bit of a steal at their spot, even just showing better for themselves than their draft spot did, because we've started to underrate some larger defensemen because we appreciate the skilled puck moving guys so much. But when someone's big and they can skate like Seider or like Keandre Miller does, that's huge. It kind of puts them at, somewhere between like the old school, like bruising defenseman and the modern, quick, skilled puck moving guy. Yeah. I think Reinbacher could be that. Sandin-Pellikka's offense is, it's self-evident. It's obvious when you watch him play. And you watch him get given tons of time in overtime. He gets overtime minutes as a 17-year-old at a U20 tournament. That means something when there's some pretty good defensemen on that team. Yeah. It was a little bit of a surprise to even see him make the roster. So for him to be one of the most trusted defensemen was impressive for sure. I just think Reinbacher's performance was a little misleading at the World Juniors. Okay, we're going to wrap the show up as we love to do with one last segment, our prospects of the week. And I'm just going to start this one off. My prospect of the week is Zachary Bolduc, St. Louis Blues prospect playing in the QMJHL. He was at the Team Canada training camp and selection camp for the World Juniors, just missed out on making it, and then ruined his chance of ever making it again by telling some reporters that he thought the only reason he didn't go is because he's Quebecois and that they don't like the French players. But anyway, just ignore that, because he went back to the QMJHL, and in 10 games since coming back from that, back from the selection camp there, he has 13 goals and 20 points in 10 games. So however you feel about his speeches there, it lit a fire under him, and he's been playing wicked ever since. So I'd keep an eye on him. He's been pretty impressive to me. Peter, who's your prospect of the week?
Yeah, you mentioned how you liked the placement I had of Colby Barlow, and he's going to be my prospect of the week, mainly because since December 17th, he is on a 9-game point streak, but he has 18 points in that span. Very impressive production. As a result, he has quite a few goals in there. I think there was only one game where he didn't have a goal. And as a result of that, he now has 55 points. overall for in the OHL. That puts him 4th overall in scoring behind Pavel Michkov, Logan Morrison, and Ty Voice. So the fact that he's able to
Not
increase
bad.
Not bad.
exactly, not bad at all. The fact that he was able to increase that production, push himself into the top 5 spot for OHL scoring, that is really impressive, to say the least. Obviously, we talk about how great of a two-way scoring winger he can be. I mean, also being on pace for 99 points and 52 goals is definitely impressive, especially for a draft year player.
Yeah, that's a great one. I feel like Barlow has a better chance than most in this draft to be a legit NHL player next year. He's got the size and the two-way game and the shot that I think he could actually make an impact. That's a great call. Matt, who's your prospect of the week this week?
I'm going to go to a guy that blew up the WHL last season. Canucks prospect Arshdeep Bains. He's, I didn't anticipate him to be a high-end goal scorer in the AHL, but he's starting to kind of turn a corner in that respect. Last few games, he's a point a game playing the last 5. He's got 2 goals, 5 points, and over the last 10, he's got 8 points in 10. So, I mean, +7. Abbotsford Canucks are doing really well right now. They are on, I believe they were just snapped like an 8 or something game winning streak or something like that.
Wow.
So, I mean, he's got 4 goals and 18 points in 29 games, but most of those points have come in the last 10. So he's starting to kind of turn that corner. I mean, obviously, again, he had 112 points last season in the WHL, not on pace for that at all. But he is on pace for 41 points now, which is not bad if he can keep on this same pace. Maybe he's finally figured out some stuff in the AHL level, which is great because the Canucks need guys like this, the way that they're going. They may be trading a whole bunch of guys before the end of the season. So Bains may actually get some time in the NHL. Who knows? At some point. So, but he's doing really well in the AHL right now. I'm really impressed with his production because I was hoping he would at least show a bit of that at this level, and hopefully he's turned a corner in that respect.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm always happy for guys like that. An undrafted guy out of the WHL gets signed after he ages out of the WHL, gets signed by his hometown team. He's a West Coast boy. He's a Greater Vancouver area, whatever. Yeah, it's good to see him starting to figure it out a little bit, put some stuff together in the AHL. One person I actually want to mention, one prospect that didn't get the chance to mention is Yaroslav Askarov. Has been great in the AHL this year, but he actually got called up to the NHL for the Nashville Predators and played his first NHL start against the Montreal Canadiens. He lost 4-3, but he didn't look that far off. The Predators haven't been incredible this year. The reason they are even remotely where they are in the standings is probably largely due to UC Saros being one of the best starters in the league, one of the best under 6 foot goalies, probably the best. But that was pretty impressive. So I just wanted to point out Askarov has looked pretty great lately as well. All right. Well, that will do it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss any more of our episodes or the other awesome shows that are on here. And make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of 2023 NHL draft coverage, including Peter's NHL draft rankings. Check those out for sure as top 64 for January. Lots of info to get from that. And we've got tons of draft coverage coming up for the next few months as we start getting towards that point. So if your favorite team is bad, the Hockey Writers is the place to be. I'm talking about you, Matt. I'm just kidding. All right.
I'm actually gonna be really happy if the Canucks keep going this way. I'm be really happy to write articles on draft targets like Zach Benson. And
yeah, absolutely.
Like
That's silver lining for sure. Yeah. All right. So make sure you also check out sportsidehustle.com. Thank you for sponsoring this week's episode. And thank you, Matt. Thanks, Peter. Thank you all for watching this episode of Prospect Corner, and we'll see you next time.